The mother wound can make mother-daughter relationships complicated. It can be the place where love feels deepest and the place where wounds feel oldest. For many of us, our first understanding of womanhood came from our mothers. Through what they modeled, what they withheld, what they survived. We don't just inherit eye color and mannerisms. We inherit nervous systems, beliefs about love, about emotion, about what it means to be a woman. And sometimes, without meaning to, we pass those same patterns forward. For a long time, I thought healing would automatically make me different. That awareness alone would protect my children from the things that hurt me. But becoming a mother showed me how deeply the body remembers. How quickly old survival strategies can surface in moments of stress, in moments of fear and emotional overwhelm. Sometimes we don't recognize these inherited patterns because they don't look exactly the same. They're hidden inside good intentions, inside protection and love. And that can be difficult to face because most mothers who carry wounds are not trying to harm their children. Many are trying desperately to give their children what they never had. But unhealed grief has a way of shaping the way we respond, how we soothe our children, how we interpret emotion. And motherhood can bring you face to face, not only with your child's needs, but with the child you once were. We tell ourselves we'll do it differently. We promise we'll be softer, more present, more nurturing. But healing isn't a straight line. Sometimes the very thing we longed for as daughters becomes the lens in which we mother. And that lens isn't always clear. This episode isn't about blaming mothers. It's about understanding inheritance. It's about what happens when a daughter grows up carrying unmet needs and then becomes a mother herself. It's about projection, repair, and about realizing that loving your child well sometimes means grieving what you didn't receive. And it's also about the humbling truth that breaking cycles doesn't mean you won't see yourself in the very patterns you promised to end. This is Born Tired, where survival meets healing, a podcast for those of us who grew up in survival mode but are ready to heal and speak our truth. I'm Irene, a cycle breaker learning what peace feels like after years of survival. Every episode is an invitation to rest inside your truth, to feel seen, and to remember you were never alone. This is what it sounds like when silence finally breaks. Before we begin, I want to share a gentle reminder. Please listen in a way that feels safe for you. If at any point you need to pause or step away, honor that. Your well-being matters more than finishing the episode. You are not alone. Take care of yourself while you listen. When I found out I was having a daughter, I cried. I had imagined this relationship long before she existed. Somewhere inside me was a quiet longing for a bond I never fully experienced. I didn't just want a daughter, I wanted to create something different. The lack of nurturing I received from my mother shaped so much of what I envisioned. As a child, I craved physical affection. I wanted to be held. I wanted hugs that felt warm and steady. I wanted softness. So when I became a mother, I leaned in all the way. I hugged my children constantly. I kissed their foreheads. I rubbed their backs. I sit close. Physical affection feels natural to me because it was something that I longed for. But motherhood humbled me quickly. My children are on the spectrum, and physical touch isn't always comforting for them, especially my daughter. Since she was a baby, she didn't like tight hugs. Her body would stiffen and she would pull away. She needed space more than closeness. And I had to learn something that felt bigger than what it sounds. That love is not about giving what you needed. It's about giving what they need. That lesson kept unfolding. I had signed her up for activities I wish my parents had signed me up for. Opportunities I thought would build confidence and that I thought would be magical. In many ways, I was trying to rewrite my own childhood through hers. But over time, I realized she wasn't enjoying those things. She didn't need the mother I needed. She needed the mother she needed. That realization was humbling, and I'm grateful I had it early. But healing doesn't mean that the wound disappears. Sometimes it just gets quieter until something activates it again. I remember when she was in middle school, she had come home one day from school and she was having a hard time. She was feeling overwhelmed and emotional. You could just physically see that she wasn't okay. And instead of sitting with her feelings, I told her to smile. I told her she should just try to be happy. I thought I was helping. And she looked at me, a sixth grader, just clear and steady, and said, "It bothers me when you tell me that. I can't just stop what I'm feeling and be happy. That's not realistic." And in that moment, something clicked. Because when I was young and upset, my mother would say the same thing to me. Just be happy. I felt it in my body, the echo. I wasn't soothing my daughter. I was dismissing her. I was uncomfortable with her sadness, so I tried to rush her out of it. It wasn't intentional, but it was inherited. And inheritance still has impact. So I apologized. I told her she was right. I told her she didn't need to shut her feelings off, and that I would try to listen instead of fix. That moment taught me something important. Breaking cycles isn't about never making mistakes. It's about noticing when the old pattern shows up and choosing differently. Motherhood has been one of my greatest mirrors. My daughter didn't need me to be everything my mother wasn't. She needed me to see her. And every time I adjust, every time I listen, every time I soften instead of control, I heal something inside myself too. What I've come to understand about the mother-daughter relationship is that it's rarely just between two people. It carries history and silence. It carries the unfinished emotional business of generations. When I became a mother, I thought I was starting fresh. I thought love alone would be enough to make everything different. And in many ways, I did create something different. There is warmth in my home that I didn't experience. There is affection and openness. But awareness doesn't erase imprinting. The way we were mothered shapes the way we experience emotion. It shapes how safe we feel with vulnerability, how we respond to stress, ours or someone else's. If you grew up with emotional dismissal, you may struggle to sit comfortably with your child's sadness. If you grew up needing to be the strong one, you may unconsciously expect resilience before tenderness from your children. If you grew up craving affection, you may equate closeness with physical touch, even if your child expresses connection differently. None of this makes someone a bad mother. It makes someone human. Mothering a daughter can feel especially charged because daughters often mirror the places where we're still healing. When she feels overwhelmed, it can activate the overwhelm you were never allowed to express. When she resists you, it can stir up rejection that you once felt. If she sets a boundary with you, it can challenge the version of you that was never allowed to. Daughters don't just learn from what we say. They learn from how regulated we are, how we handle our emotions. They learn whether their inner world is welcome in our presence. And that can be confronting. There's a particular vulnerability in mothering a daughter because she will one day become a woman. And consciously or not, we want her to be protected from the pain that we endured. We want to equip her and strengthen her, shield her. But sometimes protection turns into control. Equipping turns into shaping. Sometimes shielding turns into not allowing her to struggle in her own way. I had to learn that my daughter is not my second chance. She is her own person. She doesn't exist to redeem my childhood or to fulfill my unmet needs. She doesn't exist to validate my healing. She exists to become herself. That realization required grief for the girl I was, for the affection I wanted, for the emotional presence I longed for. Because until I allowed myself to grieve that fully, I was at risk of subtly asking my daughter to compensate for it. Mother-daughter dynamics are complex because they sit at the intersection of identity. A daughter often watches as a blueprint for womanhood. She observes how her mother speaks about herself, how she handles anger, how she navigates boundaries, what type of mistreatment she tolerates, how she responds to joy. She is studying not just behavior, but permission to feel, to rest, to take up space, to disappoint others, permission to say no. When I realized that, motherhood became less about perfection and more about modeling. I don't need to be flawless. I need to be accountable. I don't need to never react. I just need to repair when it's necessary. I don't need to erase my wounds, but I do need to own them when they show up. That moment in middle school, when my daughter told me it wasn't realistic to just be happy, that wasn't a failure of motherhood. It was evidence of growth. She felt safe enough to correct me. She felt secure enough to name her experience. That emotional literacy is something I had to learn much later in life. There is power in raising a daughter who can articulate her inner world. There is healing in allowing her to have emotional autonomy even when it's inconvenient for you. And that's where generational change happens. In choosing to listen instead of lecture, choosing curiosity instead of correction, connection instead of control. The mother wound is often described as something we carry, the ache of not being fully seen or nurtured. But what isn't talked about enough is how easily that wound can leak into motherhood if it remains unexamined. We can overcompensate, overgive, over-identify, overprotect. And beneath all of it is love. But love filtered through unresolved grief can distort. Healing doesn't mean you stop feeling the ache. It means you stop asking your child to soothe it. You learn to mother yourself along mothering them. It means recognizing that sometimes your reaction has less to do with your daughter and more to do with the girl you once were. There is something sacred about interrupting patterns in real time, about catching yourself mid-sentence, apologizing without defensiveness, about adjusting. That adjustment is where trust grows. Trust is built on showing that the relationship is bigger than your ego. In many ways, children are teachers. They expose where we are rigid, still tender. They invite us to evolve. The mother-daughter relationship can be one of the most healing relationships in a woman's life. It offers repeated opportunities for repair, and repair is powerful. It tells a daughter your feelings matter. You're not responsible for managing my emotions. You're allowed to be different from me. Your autonomy does not threaten our bond. That kind of message ripples forward, because when a daughter grows up feeling emotionally safe, she enters the world differently. She trusts her instincts. She names her boundaries and recognizes when something doesn't feel right. She doesn't shrink to preserve connection. That is the generational shift. It's presence, and presence requires humility. Motherhood has required me to examine not just what I do, but why I do it. To ask, is this about them or is it about my history? That question alone has changed everything. As I've continued walking through motherhood, I started to understand something that once felt impossible to hold. Two things can be true at the same time. I can acknowledge the ways my mother hurt me and still recognize that she was mothering from her own wounds. I can grieve what I didn't receive and choose not to pass that grief forward. I can love my children deeply and still see the places where my unhealed parts try to take the lead. There is the mother you had. There is the daughter you are. There is the mother you're becoming. And all three are often in the room at the same time. For a long time, I thought breaking cycles meant erasing the past. That if I was aware enough, reflective, intentional, I would never see my mother in myself. But healing is about integration. It's about recognizing when the old script starts playing and then choosing a new line. I no longer panic when I notice something familiar in my reactions. I pause and I get curious. I ask myself what's underneath it. Is it fear? Is it grief? Motherhood has taught me that shame doesn't create change. Awareness does. The moment I apologized to my daughter wasn't just about correcting behavior. It was about modeling something I rarely saw growing up. Accountability without humiliation. It was about showing her that authority doesn't mean perfection. It means responsibility. There is something profoundly healing about telling your child, I was wrong. It dismantles the idea that parents must be infallible. It creates space for honesty instead of hierarchy. I've also learned that children don't need flawless mothers. They need present ones. They need mothers who are willing to see them clearly, not as extensions of their own unmet needs, not as reflections of their own insecurities, not as second chances, but as separate human beings with their own nervous systems, their own preferences. And that can be uncomfortable because when you didn't feel seen as a daughter, there's a temptation to merge, to hold tighter, to make the bond everything. But healthy love allows autonomy. It allows your children to say, that doesn't feel good to me, without fear of losing connection. It allows them to have emotions that don't match yours, to become someone you didn't imagine. And that's the work of breaking generational patterns, allowing autonomy. Sometimes I think about the little girl I was, the one who wanted to be held a little longer, who learned to be strong early, who internalized that her needs came after everyone else's. She still lives inside me, but she is no longer parenting my children. I am. And I parent differently because I have done the work to see them. I've come to believe that part of healing the mother wound isn't just about how we relate to our mothers. It's about how we relate to ourselves. Can we mother the parts of us that were overlooked? Can we offer tenderness to the places that hardened? Can we stop expecting our children to fill emotional gaps that were never theirs to fill? Because that's the subtle risk, asking our children to soothe wounds they didn't create. True generational change happens when we take responsibility for our own healing instead of assigning it to the next generation. It's choosing to listen when your instinct is to fix, to sit with discomfort instead of rushing to control it, to say, tell me more instead of you'll be fine. It's allowing your children to experience frustration without trying to rescue them from every feeling. Trusting that their emotional range is not a threat to your stability. There's a softness that emerges when you stop trying to be the opposite of your mother and you start being aligned with your values. For a long time, I mothered from reaction. Now I try to mother from intention, consciously. And I've noticed something beautiful. When I allow my children to be fully themselves, I feel freer to fully be myself too. Our relationships are not built on performance. They're built on honesty, repair, and mutual respect. That doesn't mean there won't ever be tension. It means that tension doesn't mean rupture. We can move through conflict without fear of abandonment. And that is something I never fully experienced growing up. There is pride in knowing that my daughter will never have to unlearn the same emotional patterns I did. She will have her own work to do. Every generation does. But maybe hers won't include learning that her emotions are inconvenient. Maybe hers won't include shrinking to maintain peace or confusing dismissal for strength. If that's the only shift I create in this lineage, that is enough. Motherhood has shown me that breaking cycles is a series of corrections. It's catching yourself, it's apologizing, adjusting, and staying. And maybe that's the most healing part of all, staying. Not abandoning yourself, not abandoning your child or the relationship when it gets uncomfortable. Just staying present long enough for something new to take root. And that, more than perfection, is what changes generations. I know that this can be difficult to talk about because these stories live deep in the body. They're not just memories. They're sensations and patterns. They're emotions that sometimes surface before we understand why. So wherever you are right now, see if you can gently bring your awareness back to yourself. Just acknowledge that something may have been brought to the surface. Conversations about mothers, about being a mother, can open layers we don't always expect. They can bring anger, grief, pride, sometimes all at once. Maybe you're a daughter still navigating your relationship with your mother. Maybe you're a mother trying to do things differently. Maybe you're both at the same time. Whatever role you're in, I want you to remember something. You're allowed to grow, to revise the way you show up, to learn in real time. There is no perfect script for motherhood, no flawless way to break cycles. There is only willingness to listen, to repair, to stay open when it would be easier to shut down. And if you're carrying regret for moments you wish you had handled differently, I want you to know growth is evidence of care. The fact that you reflect at all means you're not asleep in your patterns, and that matters. If you're carrying grief for what you didn't receive, I want you to hold that gently too. Grief doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you honest. And honesty is what creates change. As you move through the rest of your day, I invite you to notice one small moment where you choose differently. One pause before reacting. One question instead of an assumption. One apology offered without defensiveness. A boundary expressed without guilt. It doesn't have to be dramatic to be transformative. Sometimes the most powerful shifts are the quietest ones. And remember, the work you're doing inside yourself ripples farther than you can see. Even the small adjustments matter, especially the small ones. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need it. And take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen. Your review helps more people find the podcast and reminds others they're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe or follow the show so you never miss an episode. You can also join me on Substack, where I share weekly reflections and gentle reminders to help you feel less alone on your healing journey. You'll find the link in the show notes. If you'd like to connect beyond the podcast, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Born Tired Podcast. I'd love to hear what resonated with you. And if you'd like to support the podcast, there's a link there to buy me a coffee. Thank you for being here, for listening with an open heart. Most of all, remember this: your story matters, your voice matters, and you are not alone. This episode was written and narrated by Irene Torres. Audio production by Carlos Torres. Original music composed by Carlos Torres.